As scary as radiation can be in the Fallout universe, and in real life too for that matter, there actually is another force, one secretly being used even before the bombs fell in Fallout, that is much more horrific. Known as the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV for short, this artificial ailment is at the center and creation of countless strange, terrifying, and despicable things in Fallout lore, including two especially notable cryptids, the Snallygaster and Grafton Monster. But before we dive into these cryptids, let's go over a short summary of the history of FEV and how these monsters even came to be in the first place. Originally a spin-off of the Pan-Immunity Virion project started in 2073 by West Tech 4 years before the bombs fell, FEV was born when scientists discovered that not only could their research be used to cure things like the new plague and Chinese bioweapons, but also more general genetic engineering as well. By altering both its host genotype and phenotype, the virus was initially used in single-cell organisms where results seemed very promising. And soon, as with all things in Fallout, human trials began. Super mutants and other countless monstrosities are the result of different strains of FEV used all across America, all meant to either create super soldiers or new forms of humanity or animals alike. For example, the super mutants we see on the West Coast are quite different from the ones we see on the East Coast in Fallout 3 and 4, due to the fact that different strains of FEV created each. In fact, in Fallout 1, where it all began, the very first antagonist of the series is none other than the Master, a mutilated amalgamation of flesh that leads the Unity, an organization with FEV-infected super mutants looking to gain control of a post-nuclear world. So as you can see, FEV plays a key role in the history of not only post-war, but also pre-war Fallout, and as such is a key player in many big mysteries and how things came to be, which in our case happens to be two cryptids we are looking into next. First of which is the Snallygaster. These horrific-looking quadrupeds were originally created in the West Tech research centers located in Appalachia that produced numerous failed experiments. But one that did manage to survive was the Snallygaster, created by an unknown animal or human joining with FEV strain 006443, a combination of multiple different viruses that in conjunction produced one of the most horrific monstrosities we have ever seen in Fallout, which for years was thought to be nothing but a myth after it escaped containment in West Virginia, but centuries later managed to mate with others and produce offspring we can fight in-game. Coming in many different types, including glowing, bloody, and scorched, each and every Snallygaster looks like a mixed-up bundle of flesh, with crooked and diseased teeth sticking out of a deranged face that scratches and squeals. On their backs can be found a large hump and carapace, like a mix of a camel and tortoise genes, on top of which lies multiple spikes, and even more disturbing, eyeballs that all blink and look in different directions, implying that the Snallygaster may be a combination of hundreds of animals all in pain at once. Below their abdomens, these horror shows have 2 arms with 3 claws each, along with front legs that flail out in a triangular fashion, which makes these mutants move across the forest floors in a very creepy fashion. And truly, it goes to show just how demented and twisted FEV can be, creating aggressive monstrosities the likes of which we only could imagine in nightmares. And speaking of nightmares, there actually is one other FEV cryptid we need to touch on as well, also from the West Tech facilities of the Appalachia, the Grafton Monster. Based on a similar strain of FEV that created the Snallygaster, but this time slightly tweaked, the Grafton Monster is another successful experiment that gave birth to yet another fleshy alien-like eyesore. Standing well over 9 feet tall, this Hulk-like brute has a large tree stump of flesh for a left arm and 2 massive vampiric fingers for a right. In the center is nothing but mounds of bloody and smelly organs, tissues, and muscles, and if you encounter this rumored monster in the wilds, it will charge and kill everything in its path relentlessly. It originally escaped from containment while sedated on a truck being followed by a heavily armed convoy. But as the war broke out, the convoy was sidetracked and the Grafton Monster eventually woke up, escaping into the nearby wilds. For years, people in post-war Appalachia told tales of the monster or explained sightings of a gargantuan flesh heap running through open valleys, but it was assumed to be nothing but another folk tale to scare the locals. However, in Fallout 76, we get to fight both the Snallygaster and the Grafton monster, both of which are very much alive and very aggressive to boot. In fact, there even is a set of holotapes in-game called The Tales from the West Virginia Hills that has first-hand audio of pre-war teenagers coming into contact with the Grafton monster specifically, and it shows just how scary it can get.
I saw it plain as day in the headlights. And just look at the front end. It smashed right in. I mean, it didn't just get up and walk away. What was that?
Probably just a wolf.
It didn't sound like a wolf to me. There it is again. Whatever it is, it sounds like it's coming this way.
But for me, more than anything, it just goes to show why the universe of Fallout is so cool. A place where radiation is sometimes the least of your worries, where even before the bombs fell, horrible experimentation was creating things that could only live in our nightmares. And there's a lot more of this where that came from. Few cryptids in Fallout lore are as storied and impactful as the Mothmen. Strange creatures found near Point Pleasant in Fallout 76 West Virginia's Appalachia that are hiding some of the coolest and lesser known lore in the series. First of all, the Mothmen have been rumored in Appalachian folk tales and bedtime stories even hundreds of years ago before the Great War, where countless stories were told of beasts that would stalk people in the woods at the dead of night and looked like giant owls. So much so that in the town of Point Pleasant, found off the coast of the Ohio River, entire museums and attractions were made dedicated entirely to these strange winged creatures, half man, half moth. Standing over 7 feet tall in height and sporting a wingspan of over 10 feet wide, these cryptids not only look scary, but also have quite the presence. They have large bioluminescent eyes and abdomens, spider-like appendages, and bodies covered in fur and insect-adjacent exoskeletons, along with a shadowy cloud sometimes pouring over their bodies, which may somehow be related to studies that have found large concentrations of powdery neurotoxins on their skin. Furthermore, they can excrete excruciating screeching sounds while emitting blue sound waves that push foes back, implying they might have been experimented on at some point, giving them FEV-like powers. So in other words, these freak shows are not for the faint of heart, and actually stumbling upon one in the wild is a harrowing experience in Fallout 76, even after we know they exist. But funnily enough, they usually are quite docile and timid when actually encountered in the wild when playing Fallout 76, where often you will see one in the distance stalking you or following you, but if you approach or pull your gun out, they will fly away in a skittish manner quickly or disappear in a plume of black smoke. But that doesn't mean some aren't quite aggressive as well, especially ones that have been more involved with cultists, something we'll touch on here shortly. Because you see, before the Great War even broke out, the cult of the Mothman in Appalachia was already an extremely prominent religious movement with multiple factions. Under the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant, for instance, was a small chapel dedicated to enthusiasts where they would gather and discuss sightings or the meaning of their new god and what they asked of them. Some followers even traveled hundreds of miles across America to come worship these monsters. But strangely enough, the followers may have actually had a point. Because days before the bombs fell in 2077, sending the world into Armageddon, one of the lead Mothman cultists, known as Brother Charles, during a summoning ritual experienced what he called a vision from a holy Mothman, where he was told to seek shelter at nearby Lucky Hole Mine to hide from a great flood. This single event meant that the cultists were able to survive the nuclear winter while many others in the region instantly perished, and led to the followers of the cult of the Mothman to becoming even more resolute in their beliefs. Over time though, the cult did begin to split into two, with people who left the mines early becoming the Enlightened, a relatively secular movement led by the prophet Brother Charles that worshipped a single Mothman known as the Wise Mothman, the only one with bright purple eyes. All while another sect waited inside the mines much longer, eventually coming out years later and becoming known as the followers of the Winged Ones, a much more aggressive faction that kidnaps and tortures innocent people in sacrificial rituals to the red-eyed Mothman we can find all throughout Fallout 76. In 2102, otherwise known as the year Fallout 76 takes place, we can now find both sects of the Mothman cult all throughout Appalachia, but most concentrated in Point Pleasant, the original stomping grounds of this now great faction. And along with them, many encounters with the so-called Mothmen, either in combat, random events, or most freaky of all, while sneaking around cultist camps at night in-game, we can often find Mothmen and cultists communing with one another in strange rituals. For instance, the followers of the Winged Ones have been known to kidnap children and trap them in cages or tie their arms behind their back, after which they sacrifice them to Mothmen that come to the camps. And while there is no actual proof of a Mothman ever eating a human being alive, we do have some evidence to suggest that some might at least be interested. Regardless though, far and away the most fascinating part of the mythology surrounding the Mothmen is the theories and mysteries that they inspire. Could these creatures actually be aliens from another planet? Heinous science experiments on normal moths or human beings using FEV or radiation? Or maybe some sort of cosmic force that can evaporate from existence as we see the Mothmen sometimes do with their dark shroud? Of all of these though, maybe my personal favorite stems around the idea that the Mothmen may actually be our heroes. You see, one of the members of the Enlightened we can speak to in Fallout 76, named Marlin, mentions how he hears voices every time the cult communes with their Holy One, the Wise Mothman. And the descriptions of the voices he heard here also very closely match yet another story we know of in Fallout 4. From a raider named Hugo who was stuck inside the Dunwich Borer quarry mines. For those of you who don't know, the reason this is significant is because we know that the voices Hugo heard in Fallout 4 were none other than Ukultoth, an ancient and mythical creature who is thought to be some sort of supernatural entity, an eldritch being, or forgotten and disgraced god. In Fallout 4 specifically, Ukultoth convinces Hugo to end his life after using him as a pawn, showing just how evil the entity can be. But in Fallout 76, it seems that every time the cult worshippers hear what seems to be this same voice, the wise Mothman with purple eyes appears and steers them in a slightly different direction, away from immortal danger. Remember how Brother Charles, days before the Great War, spoke to the wise Mothman and led his people to the mines where they were safe from nuclear blasts? Well, as we will talk about later on this list with some other cryptids, Ukultoth may actually have been in that cave. But remember, the first sect of Mothman cultists, the Enlightened, left before the other sect, which was more evil, stayed behind. Because you see, Ukultoth is thought to be related to radiation, as the entity seemingly has control of ghouls through obelisks we can find in the Dunwich facilities in multiple different games, Fallout 3 and 4 included. So maybe Ukultoth was speaking to these cultists, trying to have them turn into ghouls in the nuclear blast, coming outside to stand on the roofs of their buildings. But the wise Mothman was able to save the cult by convincing them to flee to the mines instead, by warning them about a so-called Great Flood. It's hard to say though, because technically speaking, the wise Mothman could also be leading the cultists to Ukultoth within the mine. But once again, why did the Enlightened faction then leave shortly afterwards? Regardless, while we may never know the true answers here, the Mothmen and Mothwoman of Fallout 76 are one of the coolest cryptids in canon, and show just how intertwined and connecting a lot of the series' lore spanning across multiple games can be if you really look into it. For most players, they probably know the Mothmen as nothing more than giant creepy moths they shoot in multiplayer raids in Fallout 76, who sometimes have people in robes praying to them. But the deeper you look, the more fascinating this mystery becomes, and the Mothmen may actually be at the center of another grand cryptid mystery coming up on this list as well, you guys won't want to miss. And it goes to show why something that seems so silly and useless, like the idea of cryptids in Fallout, can actually lead to the coolest tidbits of lore and intrigue that really do make each and every game that much more fun to play when you understand them. It's one of the main reasons I love making videos like this for you guys, because I think it makes it so much easier to fall in love with games when you know a lot of the crazy lore going on behind the scenes. And in terms of insane lore and cryptids, we have a lot more where that came from. The Interloper, Also known as the Firstborn of the Wood, is a cryptid many Fallout players may have never heard of, that is hiding potentially some of the biggest and most revealing secrets in the entire series. Located in Fallout 76 specifically, the elusive monster, or at least its corpse, can be found deep within the Lucky Hole mine, where near the end of the cave we can uncover a large creature that looks like a cross between an alien, man, and tree. There are parasitic tentacles sticking out of its face, along with narrow and elongated legs that put this monster well above 10 feet tall. But nowadays, there isn't much else to glean from this mysterious corpse itself, so it's the mystery surrounding it that makes this cryptid so special. And that's because dotted all around the Interloper and Lucky Hole Mine are dozens of altars with skulls and antlers, along with 6 skeletons implying that something very sinister happened here before. These men, women, and children had come here to pray for the entity, and in their devotion were seemingly slaughtered and left to rot. And if we make our way back to the entrance of the mine, we can actually find a holotape left behind by a man named Jeff Lane, which explains that he is here after being called by a perplexing entity, luring him deeper into the cave to find oblivion, presumably coming to the same fate as the skeletons we found. And this is where things get really crazy. If we make our way over to Jeff Lane's apartment in Point Pleasant, we can find yet another holotape on his table titled The Interloper, where he says the following.
There are other things in this world now that cannot be explained. The end of the world has awoken. Something. We all know the Mothman is out there, stalking and watching us, but what of the unseen? There are things we can only glimpse in our minds. Great entities beyond our comprehension. The Mothman is a creature more like us than the unknowable horrors in the peripheral vision of our subconscious minds. No longer just a false memory now. I have heard a tale of this entity made real, deep in the earth. And the storyteller was mad by any reckoning, but his story, no less true. My name is Jeff Lane, and I will lay bare this watcher. No matter how deep I must go, I will come to know the true nature of the Interloper.
So it's clear that this entity is something Jeff Lane had taken a very keen interest in. And from what he knew, it was a being of great power and influence that clearly eventually turned him mad and led him into the mines where he would perish. But still the question remains, what or who is the Interloper exactly? And why are so many people in the Appalachia region of Fallout 76 worshipping or dying for it? Well, if we look again at those antlers found inside Lucky Hole Mine, they actually look quite familiar. And that's because we can find these exact altars in another location in Fallout 76 as well, the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant. Located within the usual museum is a door that can only be opened with the most expert of lockpicks or a special key, one we can find left behind by none other than Jeff Lane. If we use his key to get inside, we find ourselves in a top secret underground chapel beneath the Mothman Museum that is home to none other than dozens of the same altars we found in Lucky Hole Mine. And for those of you paying close attention, you may recall that this is the location where Brother Charles saw his vision from the Mothman warning the cult of the Mothmen to escape from a flood, in this case, the bombs dropping shortly. So could this all somehow be related to the Interloper and the Mothmen as well? We know that the Mothman cultists did escape to Lucky Hole Mines right as the bombs fell, and that is what saved their lives. And we also know that the Interloper being is somehow associated with not only the place this vision happened, but where the cultists survived. And later, others were sacrificed or lured in. Potentially, this implies that the Mothman is more evil than we originally thought. Or it could once again tie into the idea that they are a benevolent force trying to save the cultists from even more Cthulhian-like beings, ones that worship an ancient god known as Ugletoth, an ancient god that may also be known as the Interloper. And we have some very compelling evidence to back up this theory as well. Because as many Fallout veterans know, in Fallout 3 and 4, we can find multiple Dunwich Boars buildings which serve as breeding grounds for Ugletoth and his victims, including the Dunwich Boars building in Fallout 3 and the quarry mines in Fallout 4. In Fallout 4 specifically, if you make your way all the way through the quarry, deep past level 4, where multiple dead bodies and visions of ritual sacrifice can be found, there is a small pool of water. If you swim your way to the bottom of this pool, you will find none other than one of the coolest melee weapons in the game, but also, and even more interestingly, a partially excavated metal face, seemingly a statue or corpse of an ancient being or god. And what would you know? In Fallout 76, inside the Lucky Hole mine, if you look close enough, hidden behind vegetation near the interloper is the exact same metal face half excavated from the earth. This heavily implies that the interloper may be none other than Ugaltoth himself, a dark being or cosmic entity that potentially millions of years ago served as a god of the universe that after and even before the bombs fell in Fallout has been slowly trying to gain its power back by luring in unsuspecting victims. And it goes to show that radiation, FEV, sadistic killers, and wild animals may somehow be the least of our worries in the Fallout universe. And personally, I love stuff like this. It makes lore in games so much more interesting and always makes you wonder about what could be out there. For example, in Fallout 76 as well, we can find another strange creature called the Visitor in the Deep, which may have connections to the interloper, as its face has the exact same blossoms erupting outward, and also it's made of a similar wood-like exterior as well. On top of this, in Starfield, there is a hidden quest where we can uncover a derelict spaceship called the Collander, which inside is full of corpses and creepy notes, one of which explains that on board was a specimen known as the Interloper. In Starfield, the Collander was a special research vessel that was tasked with investigating the most mysterious organisms in the universe. But after capturing the dark entity known as the Interloper, the ship lost power and everyone on board was slaughtered. When we board the vessel in-game, left behind are strange creatures and flesh-like substances that take over the entire area. And after fighting your way through everything, you are left with more questions than answers. But once again, it implies that the Interloper, likely a cryptid millions of years old, is at the center of a grand conspiracy, the likes of which carries across multiple games and universes that might just hold the keys to the biggest revelations in Bethesda Studios' history. In Fallout, strange and wacky things are so commonplace at this point that they are now a staple of every single game players have come to expect from the series. But maybe most famous of all of these are a cryptid that might just play a key role in every major event in Fallout, and could be hiding some truly insane revelations: the aliens. Found in every single mainline Fallout entry and offshoot, as well as multiple DLCs, aliens are just as prominent in pop culture in the Fallout universe as they are in our real world. But as you will see, they also have a lot more to them as well. To start off, in the modern timelines we play in the Fallout series, post-war and the bombs falling, aliens have been an accepted part of life for some time. Long before, during the dawn of the 17th century, they were nothing but a fringe conspiracy and myth which were rumored to meddle in human affairs and politics all the way up until the 1960s, where they were still presumed to be nothing more than ideas of madmen and conspiracy theorists. We know this because of characters we meet in the games like Toshiro Kago from the Mothership Zeta DLC for Fallout 3, an abducted samurai from the 1600s feudal Japan on board an alien spacecraft that has no idea where he is, and he doesn't even speak English. On top of this as well, some lore tidbits like the captive logs on Mothership Zeta or top secret enclave terminals we can break into shed some more light on this as well, giving us specific locations or events throughout history that aliens have been presumed involved in. For example, before the bombs fell in the Fallout universe, during the resource wars between China and the United States, one of the key victories for America was the reclamation of Anchorage, Alaska, which allowed the United States to gain control over large swaths of key resources like uranium and petroleum. Multiple reports from this skirmish, though, on the American side tell tales of strange alien creatures that literally came down onto the battlefield mid-fight and abducted soldiers during the firing back and forth, only to never be seen again. So it's clear that for hundreds of years, aliens have been at least somewhat involved in the affairs of humans on Earth in Fallout. But things are only going to get crazier from here. First of all, the middle of the 1960s were the period of time where aliens became an actually accepted part of life in Fallout canon, due to the abduction of the crew of the Clarabella 7 space capsule, which caused the general public to become aware of the alien presence. But even before this, aliens were a popular form of pop culture that dominated comics and movies alike. In fact, even before the Clarabella 7 incident, conspiracy groups like Queriverum played a key role in getting aliens into the mainstream. These crackpots from the early 60s pre-war area, whose name literally means seek the truth in Latin, were an organization that believed in what they called the conspiracy. That a shadowy group inside the US government had discovered aliens and were reverse engineering their technology in top secret facilities in order to gain an edge in future conflicts, as well as power over the general population. We know that this secretive group inside the government, known as the Enclave, did in fact exist. But what is less known is that Queriverum was also able to steal an actual Enclave alien weapon known as the MPLX Nova Surge, which led to the US government swiftly taking action and destroying Queriverum and their members, trying to erase them from the history books. Or in other words, for hundreds of years, secretive organizations at the highest levels of government across the world have been aware of the presence of aliens around Earth, but they tried to keep these findings secret for hundreds of years to not scare general civilians and to keep the technology for themselves. Some prominent examples of this include private companies as well, like Wilson's Automatoys, a children's toy manufacturer which used alien tech in their products that could have negatively affected children as they grew up. Most famous of these are the Giddy Up Buttercup horse dolls they created, which we can find hundreds of on board the alien mothership Zeta during the Fallout 3 DLC, which imply aliens have been extensively looking into these human-alien hybrid technologies for some time. On top of this, the ultra-advanced and intelligent Skynet AI we encounter in Fallout 2, which manages the Sierra Army Depot we break into, was actually created by the Enclave using alien technology hidden in underground facilities long before the war even began. But this all still begs the question then, what about the actual aliens themselves? What are they like? Well, we know quite a bit here too, but also have a ton of questions still left open. To start, the first time we encounter aliens in the Fallout universe is none other than Fallout 1, where players can stumble upon a random encounter in-game of a crashed alien spaceship with skeletons of unknown organisms on the ground with large heads and small bony frames. These aliens were most certainly part of the most prominent form of alien culture we know, the Zetans, who are the actual aliens we encounter firsthand in all of the mainline games and DLCs. While not the only confirmed type of alien in the Fallout universe, the Zetans are in a league of their own when it comes to influence on earthly affairs. For hundreds of years, they have abducted countless people across the world from multiple cultures, ranging from professors of anthropology, linguist specialists, and most hauntingly, an individual in the White House who had the codes to launch the entire US nuclear arsenal himself, implying that maybe it was not humans that launched the first nuclear bomb that propelled Earth into a barren wasteland, but extraterrestrial organisms hell-bent on our destruction. In fact, this theory has gained a lot of support in Fallout communities over the years. After all, it would make sense that Zetans would try to wipe out humanity after they discovered how advanced our alien hybrid weaponry was getting, which we can see them studying for ourselves firsthand on their ships. But overall, it goes against the core themes of Fallout, about the human condition and propensity for brutality. And on top of that, one of the original creators of Fallout, Tim Kaine, has outright come out and said that China were the ones who launched the first nuke in his mind, which would make sense since they were losing the war. Regardless, whether the Zetan aliens did start the war is still up for debate, with quite a lot of compelling evidence implying they might have at least had a hand in the events that took place that fateful day. What we do know for sure though is that not just humans have been the victims of Zetan influence over the years, as there are multiple reports of other animals being kidnapped and experimented on, including Brahmin, super mutants, large rats, and even robots. And the reason the Zetans are so focused on abductions like this, as far as we can tell by studying their writing, architecture, civilization, and customs, is because of their extreme societal structures and policy. For instance, in Zetan culture, progress is seen as the ultimate goal above all, to be reached at any cost. with almost no concern put over one's life or hobbies. Because of this, Zetans themselves usually lack any form of individual expression, with a harrowing soul devoid of life in their eyes, and keen affinity for scientific endeavors that allude to some of the worst experiments in human history, a la Unit 343 from World War II. On top of this, their societal bearings are extremely hierarchical, with all workers, engineers, and generals wearing specific outfits to designate their status in relation to one another, forcing the strong to the top and the weak to a life of hardship and nothingness. Almost paradoxically though, the alien workers we fight on board Mothership Zeta in the Fallout 3 DLC do display fear and panic when being attacked, letting out screeching wails and moaning sounds that imply these seemingly heartless and emotionless monsters may actually have more traditional feelings than we know. Speaking of things we don't know as well, the Zetan language, and all alien languages for that matter, are still completely foreign and unknown in the Fallout universe. So while there are examples like Sally, a small girl abducted on board an alien ship we can find alone and abandoned, who does understand Zetan behavior and desires after years traveling through the stars, we still have no direct evidence of one-on-one alien to human communication on the fly. Rather, almost all interactions, including recorded captive logs, show a myriad of confusing moments where either Zetans or humans alike have no idea what the other one is trying to say. Regardless though, while Zetans and humans are still unable to talk to one another barring some top secret Enclave tech we're still unaware of, what we can tell is that their technology is very advanced, including things like plasma weaponry, force fields, nuke-equivalent warheads in a much smaller payload, teleportation matrices, cryo chambers, holographic projections, and autonomous combat and support drones alike. Which all means any captured alien tech has good reason to be top priority for any governments that find them. And it's very clear now how the Enclave was able to get such a powerful technological advantage before the wartime efforts even kicked off. In fact, some evidence points to the idea that after acquiring multiple portions of alien technology over the years, the Enclave and top US government officials, in conjunction with Vault-Tec, may have conjured up a plan to abandon Earth and fly into the stars to colonize a new planet, while using heinous Vault experiments as a way to learn more about science and the human condition before dooming a planet they saw as far too gone and working to create a better humanity and utopia on a new world. But once again, as with many things in the Fallout universe, ideas like this will likely never be truly known, and a big part of the fun in the games, TV show, and books is trying to piece together all of the clues for ourselves and coming to our own conclusions. However, before we move on from this section, I wanted to touch on a couple more aliens that specifically tie into the idea of cryptids, as there are a lot of potential ones to choose from multiple Fallout games. First of all, the most famous of these cryptid aliens has to be the Flatwoods Monster, with purple hazy faces and floating contraptions working around the town of Flatwoods in the wilderness of Appalachia, who during the pre-war era were rumored to have abducted countless residents and conducted strange experiments on them. In Fallout 76, we can actually fight these Flatwood monsters in-game, where they have the ability to teleport and regenerate health on top of controlling the minds of nearby wildlife and robots. Out of all of the aliens we have seen in Fallout, the Flatwoods Monster might be the most traditional cryptid of all of them, because for decades, civilians in the Appalachian region debated their existence, and rumors of the Flatwood Monster were used to scare children into never going out into the woods alone and to go to bed on time, without most parents knowing that the concern was a genuine and real one, not a strange hoax. On top of these Flatwood agents though, we have some even stranger aliens to touch on as well. The Wanamingo, for example, is a creature found in Fallout 2 and 76, which looks to take on the appearance of a xenomorph from the Alien series with many prominent extraterrestrial features that imply this monster may have been created by the Zetans at some point. For years, this cryptid was seen as nothing but a folktale and superstition, but we know now that they are a real thing that exists in the world, along with a queen that lays their eggs constantly. Technically speaking though, some in the community are debating whether or not this monster was created by FEV rather than some egg from a foreign planet. But But maybe my personal favorite of the cryptid aliens has to be the abominations. Presumed human Zetan hybrids with a large muscular and pale frame, along with piercing dark black eyes that give way to a voidless interior, who are extremely aggressive and attack both humans and aliens alike on sight in a brutish fashion. But really, at the end of the day, out of all of the cryptids on this list, far and away, aliens are the ones that have the most influence on what we have come to know as the modern timeline of the Fallout series, including hundreds of abductions, countless experiments, and the influence of brand new technologies, cultures, and ideas, and maybe even being the catalyst for the wars that broke out in the first place. And yet, in terms of mystery, they are also now one of the best known cryptids in Fallout of all time, which means for the rest of this list, we have a lot more strange and unknown things that even many Fallout veterans might know nothing about.